Welcome to another episode of the WAN Manager Podcast. I'm your host, Bryan, and this is the show where we talk to networking experts about the data services that make business possible. We've talked a fair bit about network as a service and middle mile on the show in terms of the framework, the concept, who the market players are, what products are available to some extent. And although it's still, I think, early days in this space, I really wanted to get into some, maybe real world use cases. So to do that, I'm happy to welcome as my guest today, Ameet Naik, who is the Director of Product Marketing at Cloudflare. Welcome, Ameet.
Greg, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I wonder if you could just start off with maybe a brief background, both kind of on yourself and now what you're up to at Cloudflare.
Hi, so I've been working in the networking industry for about 20 plus years, going back to the early days of commercial internet to UUNet, if anyone remembers them. And it's been a really interesting journey watching how networks evolve. And I found myself at Cloudflare about a little over a year ago as Cloudflare started getting into more of the traditional enterprise WAN and network as a service business.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where I wanted to start here because I'm sure a lot of the folks listening are familiar with Cloudflare, are probably thinking of it as a CDN, maybe more recently kind of security company. I have you here to talk about NaaS and the middle mile. Maybe just give us a brief background on what I've already heard about a little bit on Magic WAN and kind of what Cloudflare is up to in the WAN space these days.
Absolutely. So that's why I'm here. It's my responsibilities at Cloudflare are product marketing for all of our network services products, so including all the Magic products. So Cloudflare, we've historically been we started with a very simple mission, right, and a very clear mission that still holds true today, which is to help build a better internet. Mm-hmm. And that's a very broad statement. It means a lot of things. But when we started off, we started solving problems on the internet that were, 10, 11 years ago, that were predominantly around performance and security, right? And that's why we built a CDN. We didn't start off wanting to be a CDN company. We realized there were some problems we could solve there. And that was sort of our entry into the market. And more recently, we're seeing organizations become more and more internet-centric. And we started thinking about, well, how can we help them there? How can we solve some of the newer problems that the internet is facing, where it's asked to become an enterprise network and it's asked to become a corporate network? And it's the good day the internet is great, right? But would you do remote surgery over it? Right? Does it have that level of reliability, availability, performance? And we definitely know the security challenges. So to help with some of these problems, one of our products we launched over 3 years ago is called Magic Transit. And this is our network-based DDoS protection as a service product. And that's been really successful in the market. A little over a year and a half ago, we launched our Magic WAN service, which allows organizations to interconnect sites and use using the Cloudflare network. And connect data centers, connect branch offices, retail locations, homes, users, and what have you, right? And then along with that, we also have Magic Firewall, which is our firewall as a service offering in the cloud.
Gotcha. So you're bringing all the magic together. I got to, before I dive in, ask you, didn't you guys used to have that wall of lava lamps for generating random numbers? Is that still there?
Guess what? It's back. So as with most folks, we've had some changes in the way we work. Right. So we took advantage of the little pause over the last couple of years and renovated our office. So it wasn't quite there for a while, but it just came back beginning of the year. Everyone's really excited about it. So
I love it.
If anyone's ever in San Francisco and Townsend Street, stop by, give us a shout, and we would be happy to get you in and take a picture.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I've seen that picture online many times, and it always kind of gives me a chuckle, especially for your, role-playing game nerd, random number generation. Right? I like that concept. All right, so I think it's really interesting the sort of way that you phrase that, for bringing together the security aspect, like the Magic Firewall, the Magic DDoS, and the Magic WAN, right? All of that, and that if your original goal was making the internet better, all of a sudden the internet has kind of become the WAN for many people, right? So the broad use case for NaaS and other middle mile solutions, I think has been on a lot of network managers' minds, even if they have not yet made the kind of leap away from MPLS. It's certainly something they're thinking about, which is that, okay, well, I'm familiar with the internet, right? So am I going to do my enterprise applications over that internet? And in terms of, security, application performance, latency, that kind of thing. So Ameet, one of the things I was hoping, you could help us out with today is just some real world use cases. You've had Magic WAN out there for a year and a half. What types of companies have approached you for these services, and kind of what problems specifically are they hoping to solve?
Yeah, so if you look at the history of MPLS, right, MPLS solved a lot of problems for the way WANs were built, 10, 15 years ago, right? It solved the hub and spoke problem. You no longer needed like an N square mesh of tunnels. You no longer had to have star topologies, right? It was sort of any to any connectivity. Also came with really good gold-plated SLAs, right? You got your
Right.
three classes
That's
of
the key.
service.
That's what's scary to give up, right? So yeah.
Yeah. But if you think about it, last 10 years we've had this thing called SD-WAN, which is
Hmm.
sort of the promise of, hey, no, you no longer need this ironclad network with gold-plated SLAs to do your business. You can use the internet. You can use redundant broadband connection and make more flexible, dynamic use of it, right? So, but we've seen some challenges with SD-WAN adoption. Migration's not, most organizations are in sort of some phase of it, right? They haven't
Hmm.
fully gone there or in the process of going there, still have some legacy MPLS. So they're kind of living in this hybrid world. But for a lot of organizations as well, I think this hit them really hard in the last 2 years,
Of
which
course.
is,
Yeah.
they had to massively reconfigure the way they work, massively reconfigure their office footprint, their physical footprint. A lot of retailers had to shut down stores or move stores or consolidate them. A lot of organizations consolidated data centers, right?
Right.
And while as they were doing that, they had this thing called an MPLS contract that was locked in for 3 years
Hmm.
that they were stuck paying for, even though they no longer have those physical premises, right? So I think that really forced a shift in thinking with organizations as to like, what does this WAN mean for me, and can I look at it differently? Can I think about it a little bit differently, right? And then, of course, the corollary to all of that was all of us have been working out of our homes for
Right.
through the better part of the pandemic, right? And we made it work, and there were all sorts of sort of ways we had to make it work, but we made it work. And organizations realized that, hey, our business is essentially running on the internet now. Right?
Right.
So what does this mean for the WAN? So
Yeah.
this is
Anything
sort of
that you hadn't migrated to the cloud, you had a real impetus to do so in the past 2 years, right? So yeah.
Absolutely. So a lot of organizations started looking at alternatives, and that was around the same time that we launched Magic WAN. So we've
Hmm.
seen organizations ranging from retailers, brand new retailers opening a physical footprint, opening hundreds of stores, and rethinking their WAN strategy, right?
Right.
Because they're much more internet centric, and they're thinking about, okay, do I really need to backhaul everything to a hub location? Do I need MPLS? Do I even need SD-WAN, right? Can I just like have a service like Magic WAN, which
Mm-hmm.
will not only give me east-west connectivity, but also north-south connectivity
Right.
when most of my traffic's really just going to the internet.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that that makes a lot of sense for a lot of folks. And like you said, I think I would back up what you've said in terms of, we hear from a lot of network managers and surveys and conversations like this and whatnot. And it is true that most are in some kind of transitory phase. There's not a whole lot of folks that are still all in on MPLS, or at least that are planning to stay that way in the foreseeable future. There's also not a whole lot that have like jumped fully into the internet sea, and so I think a lot of it is kind of trying to manage that mixed situation for now. And in that sense, I see kind of NaaS touching on two different areas. There's first like the technological changes, your instant provisioning, your bandwidth on demand kind of stuff, changing topology and data center locations, but also just the very commercial model aspect. So you mentioned, in the midst of the pandemic, there's folks locked into their 3-year MPLS contract. That's been the way that it's been for a very long time. they're used to knowing what that price is going to be, having that be sort of very predictable. And I think what changes in this world is that all of a sudden it's not just, am I doing this differently from an infrastructure standpoint, but my commercial model has changed a lot. In your experience, like, not being at a carrier that is dealing with the kind of like MPLS commercial models, how do you see customers coming to you, sort of adapting to those like commercial model changes and different ways of thinking about what are the services that I'm getting, and how do I pay for them?
Greg, the one thing we've heard consistently from customers over the last couple of years is sort of this need for flexibility and need for
Mm-hmm.
agility, right?
Right.
WAN managers themselves don't have a good sense of what their hybrid work policies are going to look like 12 months from now,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they're
Mm-hmm.
having a hard time making longer term decisions on IT investments, on infrastructure, and the WAN, because today they might be hybrid, and 6 months from now we don't know, the climate might change.
Right.
Organization might mandate everybody come back into the office, or at least majority of folks come back into the office. And so I think the key term I've heard is, they want the flexibility, they want the adaptability. And part of this is also cost flexibility, right? The ability to dial down some of these services if we,
Mm-hmm.
God forbid,
Right.
go into another shutdown and have to stay home for another 6 months, right?
Right.
So they want that flexibility. Now, you touch upon a really interesting point around with flexibility, you also have some unpredictability, right? It's
Right,
like
exactly. I think that's one of the big
pay-per-use.
things that we hear as a fear in this kind of thing is like, okay, I can go to my boss and I say, my expensive MPLS, it's expensive, yes, but it's going to be this much per month. If I go to my boss and all of a sudden there was an event and our network costs are 3 times what we thought, that's something they have to wrestle with, right? So,
Yeah. There's a couple of different ways to do these pay-per-use models, right? So the one is the cloud provider model, which is, you put a credit card down and you get a bill at the end of the month. You have
Mm-hmm.
absolutely no control over what that's going to be, right? And now they've brought in some controls where you can set caps and allocate budget, etc. But that's been problematic for a lot of organizations because it's AWS cost management is a whole industry in itself.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
And a lot of these cloud providers also charge. They don't charge by the pipe. They charge by the bucket of data that you move, which
Mm-hmm.
is again a whole discussion in itself. And we've blogged about this in the past. But our model is a little bit different in that we will sort of charge by the 95th percentile of bandwidth that you're going to
Mm-hmm.
need, and we'll charge at an aggregate level by region. So you get a bandwidth cap for North America, for example, at the 95th percentile. So you still get to burst above that,
Right.
but you get a bandwidth cap, and we don't care if your users are in one office, and let's say you decide to bring your whole staff into your Austin office one day for an all hands, and suddenly traffic there goes up.
Right.
Right? We don't care that went up, and they can still use and consume more out of that office for that week. And then later, when the users go back to their home offices, right, so that the bandwidth it all gets aggregated at that regional level.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it gives a little bit more predictability. It is still a fixed ceiling contract,
Right.
but they have the flexibility to add to it down the road or reduce it if they need to.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and that gets us to the kind of thing you alluded to before, that the IT infrastructure team reacts to all of this. They don't drive any of it, right? So whoever in the C-suite is making these decisions about what the future of work looks like, right? Obviously, I'm pretty strongly on team flexibility,
Yeah.
right?
And I can tell you, like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of factors that go into that decision. Your WAN capacity is not one of them.
Exactly. I mean, this has always been the case for WAN managers that out there in all kinds of things, even down to where do my data centers go. The WAN wasn't a part of that decision for a very long time. I think that part's getting better. Security, the WAN often wasn't even a hardcore part of that decision, right? So that's why I say that the IT infrastructure team ends up reacting to all of this. So I think that's why there's so much interest in this space. Is that if the last 2 years have taught us anything, it's that flexibility and agility are key, no doubt, right? That things are the world is going to shift underneath your feet. And to your point, even when we do have some companies that might make the decision to send everybody trudging back to the office or whatever the case may be, the compute and the usage has changed a lot, and that's not going to go back to the way that it was, right? So people are going to have to be on Zoom calls or whatever, because that's what their clients and business partners or whatever are going to set up for them. So those bandwidth needs are going to inherently be very different, and fall under this no matter what happens at that level.
You mentioned Zoom calls, right? This is another common problem we're seeing, right? As folks come back into the office, like let's say even if there are fewer users in the office than there were before, they're driving way more bandwidth, because guess what? I was looking around our office the other day, and every other person was in a Google Hangouts call, in a video call.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. And that's just a very different traffic pattern than what we've been used to in the past.
Yeah, exactly. And I think at this point, one of the cost cutting measures that a lot of people could undertake is getting rid of their desk phones, even, for example, right? And so then that really changes the need for MPLS with class of service designation and SIP trunking and all this. I think is really it's not dead yet, and these things always take a long time to wind down, but definitely it is not the future, right? So that pushes everything back onto the WAN manager, pushes everything is just data at this point, and so I think again they have to react to all of this and be flexible for a bunch of things that are inherently sort of out of their control. And so I do think that's why we hear so much from the end user community about sort of interest in this, even if it is kind of like waiting for the the commercial models and the technology and whatnot to sort of congeal for them, or frankly waiting to get out of their 3-year MPLS contract for that matter, right? So so when we're thinking about these NaaS use cases, like the flexibility, the agility of bandwidth on demand, and that kind of thing, I think we also inherently have to think about the security aspect, because like I said before, in a way that security wasn't integrated into these networking decisions, now you just can't escape it when you're changing where the firewalls are located and what traffic hits them and under what circumstances, and where that traffic is headed and all that kind of thing. So I wonder, Ameet, if you could kind of just share with us a little bit more about what you've seen from your customers about when they're approaching, adopting something like Magic WAN. How are they also integrating the security options into those solutions?
So this is one of the best parts about Magic WAN, right? Security is built in, and I'll talk about what I mean in a moment. Mm-hmm. But we've been talking about the convergence of network and security for some time, right? So networks, WAN managers and network engineers are the ones that just made stuff flow, and then security folks came in and said, no, you can't do that, or you can do that, but you got to stick this firewall in the path in the middle so I can control the traffic. I can control what goes in and out.
Route everything over here far away from its destination so that I can hit the firewall I already have, right? Yeah.
Exactly. But if you zoom out a little bit and really think about networks 20-25 years ago, right? They were kind of castle and moat, right? You had a private network where all your business apps were, all your business users were, and then you had the big bad internet, which was unsafe. And that just had a bunch of consumer sites and then between the two, you stuck a strong, big perimeter firewall, and everything went through that, right? And the way that informed WAN architecture is you typically took all of your remote sites, backhauled everything to 1 or 2 data center locations, and that's where you had your internet breakouts. Mm-hmm. Right? And that worked really well when most of your business apps, your mission critical apps were in that data center. You had to go there anyway, right?
Right.
But then over the course of the last 10 years, we started seeing more and more SaaS. And SaaS is really architected to be delivered over the internet. If you talk to the big SaaS vendors, that's what they'll consistently tell you to optimize performance. Just break out that traffic right from your branch, put it on the internet, and then we can, from that point on, ensure that you have good middle mile connectivity. We'll go peer with all of the ISPs. We'll make sure that path is good and healthy, and we can manage performance better.
Right.
We've seen that sort of advice come through for quite some time, but organizations are really struggling with this model from a security perspective, because now you start doing internet breakouts at each of the branches. you've just opened, I don't know, 100 backdoors into your network.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the way we're used to thinking and not the way we're used to managing security. And that becomes problematic. So Cloudflare, the way Magic WAN works is Magic WAN is part of a broader platform called Cloudflare One, which is a network and security platform that integrates all of the security services on the same platform. So we've been talking about SASE for some time, Secure Access Service Edge. So Cloudflare One is our answer to SASE. And the way that works is when you connect a site via Magic WAN, you get the connectivity, which is you get a connection into the Cloudflare network and your own private routing instance. But then you also get a secure web gateway right there that you can turn on. You also get east-west routing. You also get a cloud firewall, and all of this is managed through a central console, central policy base. So you're no longer managing 100 discrete devices or appliances. You're managing a policy rule base that's much more consistent and puts security back into focus rather than worrying about, hey, are my appliances up to date? Do I have the latest software? Is everything patched? Are my policies getting synced correctly? So those sorts of problems go away. You're just looking at one rule base that's synchronized across the entire Cloudflare network. And wherever the traffic hits, once it hits your instance, it gets applied that rule base. So you have a very consistent user experience no matter what location you're in. So we're seeing a lot of organizations come to us recently with hardware backlog issues, and they're looking to upgrade the branch firewalls, but they just can't get them for another 12 months. And with something like Magic WAN, they can use what they have right now. All they need is a device that can terminate an IPsec tunnel, and they can connect to Magic WAN, and then be able to use all of the cloud-native security functionality, offload all that work from the branch device. And now they're no longer as dependent on the branch appliance. They can use what they have. They can use a white box. They can use really any off-the-shelf product that can terminate an IPsec tunnel, and they can sort of decouple themselves a little bit from these supply chain issues.
Yeah, that's actually kind of answers a question I had for you, which is essentially how are customers generally getting to you? So really, they're on DIA or maybe even a broadband connection, and it's an IPsec tunnel to get to your instance. Does that integrate with any kind of like SD-WAN? If they still want some of the edge functionality, like say load balancing or something, can you integrate with an SD-WAN device, or will it become a separate kind of service?
So Magic WAN works with what you have. You can use Magic WAN on its own, but it can also integrate with your hybrid network WAN. It can integrate with your SD-WAN. We have partnerships with a lot of leading SD-WAN vendors where we make it really easy to connect to Magic WAN from their console. So if you're looking for, you could still use the functionality in the SD-WAN appliances to do path selection and failover and load balancing. Right. You could start off with Magic WAN being one of your options, but as you move more traffic over to it, you can then slowly decommission your legacy circuits or MPLS and all the other broadband circuits, right? So you can use Magic WAN over DIA using IPsec if that's what you have at the site. We also launched an initiative last year called Cloudflare for Offices, where we're going out to all the commercial real estate companies in the world and asking to put a Cloudflare appliance in the building so that you can actually bypass DIA and connect straight into Cloudflare.
Interesting. Okay, so then you're not really even getting a DIA service. It's kind of like, in the MPLS world, what we would have called like a local loop, essentially. So you're procuring a local loop essentially directly to Cloudflare.
Absolutely. So and this helps our customers better control the last mile experience. It helps us deliver a better experience for our users and our customers, and sort of take that last bit of unpredictability out of the equation.
Right, absolutely. So really, in the end, erasing the middle mile problem altogether, essentially.
Absolutely, and you've talked quite a bit about the middle mile and it's the importance of that, right? As we look at more and more internet centric networks, and this is our way of sort of solving different elements of it. So we've focused a lot on the middle mile over the last several years, right? Optimizing the Cloudflare network. Our networks, spans over 270 cities across the globe right now. Has multiple data centers in many of these cities. We've been building it out for some time. We have our own leased fiber backbone in major parts of the world. and major traffic paths. So we've been investing in that middle mile piece, and then this is us going out to the last mile, going right to the user's offices.
Right, absolutely. So that we have the whole end-to-end, last, middle, and first mile. You let go of the responsibility at the first mile, but you have the last mile and the middle mile taken care of, I guess. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing to think about is like Cloudflare hosts millions of web properties, so a good chunk of the internet is on Cloudflare. So if your users are going out to, they're browsing the web, chances are one of those websites is on Cloudflare. It's on that very same server that the traffic hits, right?
Right.
So the way we architect our data centers, it's really any service anywhere. So as soon as your traffic hits one of our servers, it gets routed, gets security policies in a single pass, and then it may need to go out to the internet website, which may be available right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is something that we work through with enterprises a lot. From what we do at TeleGeography, one of the things we do is what we call like the WAN geography benchmark, looking at your physical footprint, the footprint of your cloud on ramps, and all that. And it's something that is a little bit new to a lot of IT infrastructure teams out there, because in the MPLS world, that was essentially all your carrier's problem, right? So, and I think we're really encouraging end users out there now to think about the geographic footprint of their providers. And that's one reason I think I saw this as a really interesting sort of development of like coming from being a CDN. That was the whole point of being a CDN, right? Was that you were optimizing the geography of the internet in order to enhance performance for those customers. And that's essentially the same concept here, right? So that you mentioned your 270 cities. That is going to be, probably as close as you can get to most of the major business centers and whatnot that a lot of enterprises find themselves in, and that really, physical location aspect still really makes a difference, right?
Yeah. One of the things we benchmark ourselves regularly against is, how close are we in terms of latency to every single internet connected user on the planet, right?
Right.
Not just users in North America with good connections, but like sitting on the island of Mauritius in the southern Indian Ocean, and that metric's been improving steadily over the last few years. Last time we measured it, we're about 50 milliseconds from about 95% of the world's population.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And as you come to North America, it's in the single digit milliseconds.
Right. And I mean, really, especially for, things like we're doing right now, like UCAS and whatnot, ends up making a lot of difference, not to mention a lot of enterprise applications that are really latency sensitive. So I think it is very much worth thinking about. And if we get to this, sort of flexible working world, right? There's a lot of people that might just distribute themselves all over all of those locations and still need, enterprise level connectivity, right? So.
Absolutely. And as you look at some of these, more latency sensitive apps, and how to make more apps responsive, right? Like we're pretty much right now approaching sort of speed of light, right? So we've optimized the path, optimized the connectivity. We're pretty much at this reaching latencies that are equivalent to the speed of light relative to the distances involved, right? So the other piece of everything Cloudflare is doing is helping organizations move some of their compute to the edge and closer to the users. So that's our workers platform, which allows developers to write serverless apps without worrying about location. All they have to do is write code, and it just runs all over the world.
Right, exactly. And there again, then that ability to sort of centrally manage things that would have required sort of local tooling in the past, I think is really key for the modern enterprise. I want to kind of wrap up by, getting a feel for where you see things headed, both in terms of the magic services at Cloudflare, and then just the WAN world in general, since that's your purview there. How do you see things developing over the next few years with your typical enterprise who's coming out of that multi-year MPLS contract, and what is their role and network kind of look like to you in the next few years?
Yeah. So in the near term, we're seeing a lot of focus in organizations around security transformation and by association WAN transformation, just to support the zero trust model, right?
Hmm.
To do some of the things we just talked about, how to make security more internet centric, how to make it more flexible, how to make it identity and device posture based. So we're doing a lot of work in that area and as well. The other big change, not so much a change, but evolution that I see is multi-cloud networking.
Mm-hmm.
As more and more of our resources live on public cloud services, right? What's the right architecture to tie all of this together? Of course, Magic WAN gives you the ability to kind of connect VPCs and different cloud providers as well as hybrid data centers, but folks are still kind of working through the right architecture, the right model, the right management plane, the right operational model for multi-cloud and hybrid cloud networks. I see a lot of focus going into that. We're putting a lot of investment in that area as well with Magic WAN and making it easier to use with your favorite public cloud service.
Right.
And then we're also seeing sort of some putting some investment in around optimization, right? So how do we, now that we've solved some architectural issues and security issues, how do we improve performance? And what techniques can we use from the traditional WAN world into Magic WAN? Like, can we add WAN optimization here, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the things that we're working on at Cloudflare.
Yeah, absolutely. And one question I like to ask a lot of different folks from different perspectives is, what implications do you think this has for what the sort of even the concept of a WAN in a sense, right? So, and what I mean by that is that if we take the concept, from its kind of namesake origin, that you had a local area network, like a LAN, like computers actually sort of linked together. We extended that across the world, essentially, computers linked together, and there was this network that belonged only to you. It was separate from the outside world. That is kind of going away, and what we have, sort of left, is that a WAN in that sense, or what do you see the WAN becoming? Do we go to a world where there's basically just dumb internet pipes with software on top of them?
And that's a really good question, and one I ask myself and ask experts repeatedly and
Mm-hmm.
customers repeatedly. Right? What is the future? What is the future experience? Right? So a couple things to think about there. One is, yes, there is for users and individuals. There's more and more sort of push towards a more seamless experience. I've heard the term like Starbucks-like experience. Right? It's like you go into a
Mm-hmm.
Starbucks cafe and you do your work from there. And why can't we do the same experience in an office? But the other side of this is, as users are going more and more internet centric, there are more and more devices appearing on the network in the
Mm-hmm.
offices that are internet connected. That
Right.
may have some east-west traffic, right? This could be, more intelligent devices, coffee machines, cameras, card readers, right?
Right.
So there's the whole IoT and OT trend that's sort of ramping up. So it'll be interesting to see. I think there'll continue to be a need for a WAN. There'll always be east-west traffic in an
Right.
organization that we need
Right.
to support. But with the rise of IoT and OT, it'll be interesting to see kind of how the traffic patterns change.
Well, Meet, thanks for doing this. This was really interesting, and I'm sure that everyone in listening has learned a little bit of something. I certainly did. How can people find you if they want to connect in some way, or do you have a blog that people can read, something like that?
Sure, yeah. You can reach me at ameet@cloudflare.com, real easy, or I'm on Twitter as well. So
Mm-hmm.
feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and or you could learn more about Magic WAN at cloudflare.com/magic-WAN.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us. I'd love to check back in and see how all of this stuff is developing, because we really do find ourselves in, I think, the most dynamic period in corporate networking that we've seen in quite a long time, maybe since we switched over from private line hub and spoke to the MPLS world. But that was a singular kind of switch. I think this is going to be an ongoing process over the next several years at least. So, yeah. Thanks for listening. The WAN Manager podcast comes from the team at TeleGeography. It's edited and produced by Jane Miller, and it's hosted by me, Greg Bryan. I also wrote the theme song that you're listening to right now. To learn more about our data, jump over to telegeography.com. or if you want to get right into more WAN content like you hear on the show, you can visit TeleGeography's WAN forum at wanforum.com. We've got all of our podcast episodes over there, WAN Manager survey data, and extra analysis pieces. That's all for now. So until next time, WAN enthusiasts,